Hi everyone, I hope you're doing well. So I think we'll give people a little bit more time to join. Give them an allowance of 8 minutes and we'll start at 7:40.
Hey guys, I'm so sorry for
Hi
joining late.
Cyrus, what's up?
My Wi-Fi is Wi-Fi. Just give me a minute. I want to upload my I want to upload my presentation to the cloud so I can create a shareable link. But hello and good afternoon. Let me do a simple introduction. I hope you guys can hear me without interference. Can you hear me without interference?
We can hear you, but there seems to be something going on with your mic. Don't know what it is,
Can you hear me
but
now?
it's not clear. Yeah, now it's better.
Is it clearer?
Okay, now there is interference.
Is still interference? Okay, let me just.
Yes.
Hello, what about now?
Very clear.
Okay, interference.
No.
Awesome. So, anyway, my name is Cyrus Dirangu. I am a solutions architect or a software developer. I run my own consulting practice here in Kenya. You can also call me a comrade. I'm also part of the Microsoft Launch and Ambassadors community. And yeah, today we're going to be learning about Azure. And I kind of tailored my presentation to be sort of more business oriented because um, Daisy and Daisy and Gregory have told me or have made it look like you guys are working towards creating startups from this project. So I'm really excited to work with you in creating this presentation a success. Kindly just give me a minute. I'm uploading my presentation from my local host to the cloud so I can create a shareable link. And it's taking a bit of time. So today what we're going to work on is we're going to talk about introduction to Azure. So we're going to do a simple basic introduction to Azure. We're going to talk about essentials of Azure. We're going to talk about the basic cloud models that we have because that can depend because you can want to have a software as a service or you can want to offer a tailor-made product to your customers. So we can talk about deploying your applications to Azure. We're going to talk about create continuous development and integration to Azure. And we're going to talk about integrating your GitHub applications to your Azure Enterprise or your Azure subscription. So yeah, we're also going to touch a little bit on machine learning because I know this is a hackathon for climate. I'm going to talk about how you guys can get to yourselves on Azure And yeah, kindly give me a minute to join again so that I can join with my PC. Yeah, so allow me to present. Okay, so I'm trying to present from Azure to, no, not from Azure, from OneDrive to Teams. Looks like as an amateur, I'm gonna say it worked last time, but it's not working right now. So let me share the link to Gregory. And then maybe he can share it on his PC. Please let me know if you can see my screen.
No, we can't.
Wow, thank you. Can you see my screen?
It's loading. We're seeing a blank screen at the
Okay,
moment.
there's activity.
Yes, now we can see it. Introduction to Azure.
Okay, thank you so much. So, like I said, thank you guys for joining my presentation today. I was tailoring this presentation to sort of make it so you can empower your business. I wanted to make it so you can look at beyond creating projects for this hackathon, but you can look at creating projects that can outlive, even you probably per se. So we can say if you're gonna pitch these projects at Microsoft, so you can create something that is like Bill Gates, and it can outlive you, for the rest of, you can just leave it and it can grow and can build projects to your, your satisfaction. So number one, before we move further, we need to understand what is Azure. So Azure is a cloud hosting service that is offered by Microsoft, and we have three cloud service models. So based on the project that you're working on or the business that you would want to tailor your project for, we have one infrastructure as a service where this is where you have control of your own virtual machines. You have control of your own networking, storage, operating systems. And here you gain flexibility and you are in control of your own services. So you are given barebone infrastructure to manage, and you're given infrastructure to work on and to produce, as a service. So here we have infrastructure as a service. It depends on what you want. If you want to deploy your own Linux server to the cloud, and then you want to deploy your own applications towards that server where you can manage, infrastructure as a service is a perfect example for deploying your own project. Two, we have platform as a service. So if you would want to focus on deploying your application, so you would want to deploy pre-built, you'd want to deploy on pre-built operating systems that are maintained by Microsoft or Azure, you can use the platform as a service where you focus on your application development. For example, if you want to use applications like Azure App Service, Azure Static Apps, where you only deal with your application development, and you can deal with creating content tailored to your clients based on what you are developing, because all you need to deal with is the features that you provide to your client, not the infrastructure that is underlying for your application. So Azure deals with infrastructure. Two, we have software as a service. So here we have, you create an application, for example, per se, with the Azure M365, where the customer or the client or the business purchases your product and they're able to get ready to use software applications hosted on the cloud. Um, Thereby, you eliminate need for installation or maintenance. Azure maintains all the background services for you. You just deal with delivering your application towards your clients. So this is a software as a service, and you can use this to deploy all your Azure applications. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. So in this session, mostly we are going to talk about deploying your web applications. I believe Greg gave you guys a perfect introduction to Azure, no, not to Azure, sorry, to GitHub, and you're able to understand how version control is important, how continuous integration and deployment working with teams is important. And we are going to show how for example, when you work as a team, everybody deploys from their branches and there's one maintainer, for example, the team lead or the manager is in charge of the code and integrating the code into one piece can be able to approve and create a continuous life cycle for your application. So for example, if you're deploying backend services or front-end services generally, you can deploy front-end and back-end services to app service. So in this specific slide, we're going to talk about Azure App Service. So here we are going to simplify application development and deployment, whereby you can deploy both your front-end and your back-end, whereby you have built your front-end and then you deploy to your front-end, to your Azure App Service. This means that you can be able to create scripts, for example, npm pre-run build, that is able to create an image of the front end, build it and copy it, and then the front end will run the, for example, HTML files. I'm giving instances for Node.js, Django, but feel free to reach out if you're having any doubts on the topic. So here we are able to deploy mission critical web applications that are tailored to your business needs. So for example, if you're creating an application that has an Node.js backend service, Azure App Service is perfect for your application needs. We have mobile applications, so we can create an engaging cross-platform mobile applications with ease. This means, for example, we can create a backend service that is serving our mobile applications live when people download them from App Store. So your application is actively hosted on Play Store, but the backend service is hosted on Play Store and is able to serve your clients on the go whenever they sign up. We have API applications. You can be able to deliver secure and scalable APIs with seamless integrations with other application services and applications. So you can create application gateways with, for example, Azure Entra, if you're Microsoft Entra. So if you'd want to people for your application, for example, you're creating an application that is tailored to people in cabs, and cabs uses per se Microsoft 365, you can be able to tailor your application to be able to cater to all the people who are on Microsoft Entra in that domain. You can even restrict people who are with this given email service, and Microsoft Entra will be able to use that to be able to determine the people who are able to access the applications on your site and be able to restrict with authentication. So this means you're able to deploy web apps, mobile apps, and API applications to serve your applications. So we have also Azure Static Apps. So you've deployed your backend service. So what next? So if you deploy your backend service, the next thing should be, how can you deploy your front-end applications? Because you do have front-end applications that are deserving, you have, for example, a React application, and you have clients who are unable to install your application. Nowadays we have accessibility to, the internet, but we do not have phones that can be able to accommodate all the apps we love. So for example, you have created a web application service. So how can you deploy a static web app? A static web app doesn't mean that your web application is not changing. So this is a common misconception I've been able to see with people thinking about deploying your application. People always say, hey, you know what? My front end is always changing based on the data that the people are requesting. No, an Azure Static App means that when you deploy your application, the code of the application is static, in that whether the person is requesting for data in the database that is specific to their tailored needs. What you're doing is you're looping through trees, you're looping through arrays, you're looping through objects. You are accessing objects or specific data types from the backend. That makes your application static in that you have already described the type of data that is supposed to come in from the backend. This makes your application absolutely tailored for Azure Static Apps. So whether you're creating a web application service and you're using React, or for example, you're using WebSockets with React and Node.js, and Node.js is controlling your server, you can use Azure Static Apps to deploy your front end and your backend to deploy it on Azure App Service, so that you can create an integrated tailor mode and you can create a secure service whereby your front end, backend, and database communicate securely through HTTPS. So when you deploy on Azure Static Apps, number one, you get fast and secure hosting for all your static websites. You get instant global states. For example, if you would want to scale your applications on a global level, you can deliver your static websites clearly and quickly through CDNs. So for example, if you'd want to offer your content to people in South Africa and you're based in New Zealand, you can be able to quickly create a CDN and you can be able to provide content to those people in that area. Kindly give me a minute. Hello guys, sorry about that. I was expecting a delivery. Yeah, so for example, if you've deployed your application, you do not have a backend, but you do have the front-end application, and you rely on authentication provided by Azure to create, this service, for example, that you can be able to help people access data, for example, that is on Azure. So you do have an SQL database on Azure, or you do have the Dataverse or a Cosmos DB running on Azure, and you have serverless functions, and you're using those functions to access the service on Azure through Azure Static Apps. So you're able to use Azure Static Apps through authentication and authorization to secure your apps through GitHub and GitHub authentication options. So you can be able to create continuous integration and continuous development to help you deploy your applications. Number two, you have automatic preview and deployment preview of your applications. This means you can be able to monitor logs on Azure of how your GitHub builds are going on. This is an advantage of GitHub apps. So for example, if you're using TypeScript and an error occurred, you can be able to see firsthand on Azure, hey, what happened? This is what GitHub is saying that happened on the CI/CD. So you're able to use GitHub Actions to build applications that are able to be integrated in your Azure Static Apps. Two, you're able to use serverless functions to add dynamic functionalities to your static applications. If there's any question, feel free to drop it in the chat. So in this tutorial, In the remaining 30 minutes, we are going to talk about how you can deploy your applications from GitHub to Azure. So you're going to streamline your development workflow. We're going to create a GitHub repository from a simple Azure application. You're going to create a continuous integration and continuous deployment where you're going to automate a build. You're going to create, if you need, we're going to create a test suite for your application, and you're going to be able to monitor it every time your application fails. Two, we're going to see the need for version control. So for example, why do you need version control? So your friend might be able to create, oh no, sorry. Your teammate or your colleague or your associate may be able to create a commit that breaks the changes that are already existing in the application. This helps you to create or see breaking changes before merges are automatically integrated to the main branch. So Azure gives you fast time to see and keeps your application live. Keeps your applications live where you will be able to see, hey, this build failed and this happened. Check GitHub Actions, and GitHub Actions will be able to give you a detailed description of what's going on. Two, you'd be able to create continuous development and continuous deployment for your applications on Azure. So you do not need to even write any YAML script at all. So you'll just be able to write simple, not simple, you'll be able to just click and you'll be able to create simple workflows for your application when they are built on Azure. And I'll be able to demonstrate this in the coming minutes. So like I've said, one, we are going to automate the process of merging code changes. Two, we are going to visualize how automatic release of updated applications work in a real production environment. Three, but this is not necessarily tailored. This works if you're using Azure DevOps. We're going to talk about or touch on Azure pipelines. Now, Azure pipelines works with either when you're working with Azure DevOps or when you're just trying to work with simple, scripts. When you're creating a pipeline from Azure to GitHub, that's a simple pipeline. So yeah. Lastly, I know this is a climate hackathon and you guys need data. And when you need data, you need to train models on data to be able to predict patterns. I'm going to touch a little bit on Azure Machine Learning Studio, although I believe Sifa, Victor, or Gregory, or Daisy will touch more on this. But one, there is the Machine Learning Studio where we are able to democratize AI development. One, we are able to do no-code machine learning, where we can be able to create, test, and operationalize machine learning models without writing a single line of code. Two, we're able to transform raw data into clean, enriched data sets for training. And we're able to also do this without touching a single line of code. This is just click-based models. Graphical user interfaces have enabled us to be able to do this data preparation. Two, we're able to select the best algorithm. So if you have theoretical knowledge for your applications, you're able to select an algorithm and you're able to train your algorithm based on the data that you have. Four, you're going to have real-time scoring for your applications and you're able to see how your model is performing in real time. Last but not least, we're going to touch on simple integrations. So
Hi, Cyrus. Your mic is muted.
please don't tell me I've been talking all this time when my mic was muted.
No, it just muted like 10 seconds ago. You finished
Oh, okay.
this machine learning
Okay,
part,
okay,
yeah?
okay. So I was saying I wanted to switch Okay, so hello. So looks like my Wi-Fi dropped. Let me share my screen again. Okay, so Greg, I need some help.
Yeah.
I'm share my screen.
Sorry.
I'm trying to share my screen, but I can only see the share tray. I'm unable to share my screen.
You're unable to see what?
So I'm unable to see the option for when I open the share tray, I'm only able to see PowerPoint and
Do you see where it's written screen or window?
no. I'm using Windows, so probably I can use the web. I'm using
I'm also
Linux. Sorry.
okay. Yeah, try using the web.
I'm try using the web so I can see if I can share my screen. Anyway, if you guys have any question, feel free to ask in the chat. I'll be able to answer you. In the meantime, I'll be setting up my PC so I can be able to share my screen, create a simple React application, and then we can deploy it to GitHub. Then we can open our Azure subscription, excuse me. And then from Azure, we can be able to create continuous integration and deployment for application. Whenever we do make a change on our application, we can see the changes live reflecting on Azure. Unfortunately for this application, I had only made presentation for Azure Static Apps because there's a notion that people do not want to deploy their front-end applications on Azure Static Apps. However, if you do deploy your front-end application, paired up with your backend application, you do create server-side rendering. However, if you do create your front-end application separate from your backend application, this means front-end content can render faster or fast before your backend application. This means if you have static content, it can render fast before the server content is rendered. This creates an enabling environment. For example, if you do want to deploy an application, for example, in Next.js, you can be able to deploy your static content before the server content is rendered. You can be able to create a loader for your states, and you can be able to deploy and see as content is rendered. So I was able to leave the call so I can be able to see if I can be able to share my screen. What are serverless functions? Thank you so much, Irungu. So serverless functions are yeah, I'm trying. I think me ni amateur screen yangu na seeing how to share presentation. Greg, can you be able to share your screen and open your Azure portal, your student ambassador portal? I'm sure you have critical applications there, but is it possible for you to share your Azure portal? how it looks like, so I can be able to use your screen and not waste our hackers' precious times, as I answer the question for Irungu.
Yeah, sure. There's not much going on in my Azure anyway.
Ah, sure. Just tell them that inside.
For real, for real. Here it is. I was actually looking at the web app and the static web app while I was at it. Let me go home. Yeah, so that's the home page. I hope you can see my screen.
I can be able to see your screen. Kindly give me a minute. Okay, so here is how your application, your Azure portal would look like. So Greg has gone a further step away, because I think if you would have seen from Greg's presentation, they are working on an e-mobility site, because Greg was sharing how he's unable to access e-mobility bikes. So wameanza create, I'm not sure if this is the right one. Is this the right startup, Greg? Hebu niambie please.
Yes, it's that one.
Yeah, it's the right one. Yeah. So Greg has been able to create. Here you can be able to see there are three things. Number one, there's the Visual Studio Enterprise subscription. That one is a free subscription that you're given as a Microsoft Learn Student Ambassador. And number one, I invite you to ask me, Daisy, Greg, Sifa, Victor, or Farah Abdirahim about joining the Microsoft Learn Student Ambassador. But if you do join the free student version, you get $100 free of Azure credits, and you can be able to deploy your applications or your startups before you join the Student Ambassadors group. Okay, so looks like my internet dropped. So as you can see, there are a few things on the top. So number one, there is create a resource, there's help and support, there's quick start center, there's virtual machines, there's app services, there's storage accounts, there's SQL databases, there's Azure Cosmos, and then there's Kubernetes services. So depending on what you would want. So for example, you do want to have a Docker service running multiple, applications. So you have a Docker service or Docker Compose running your Node.js server that has a service that runs your React server, that has a service that runs your database server, because you have an individual database service, because you're hardcore, you're the real server, you're the real developer. You don't want managed services like having an MongoDB managed server or an Azure Cosmos DB server. You just want to have your own server running on the cloud when you say. So you can do Kubernetes services, and you can be able to see if you can be able to deploy your services across multiple platforms. If you do have your Azure Cosmos DB, so you have Azure serverless functions. So somebody asked me what Azure serverless functions are. So imagine you just have your front-end applications, and you need a function that fetches data from your Azure Cosmos DB and performs some sort of filtering. So you have a model that already is trained on data, for example, for climate, and all you need is just to train data for your server. So what you'll be able to do is okay, so sorry about that. Looks like I muted myself. Greg, can you remember what was the last thing I said?
You just muted like 10 seconds ago, but I
Okay, so
remember you were talking about like this
database
Docker
services.
service. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So I think if I was not wrong, I concluded the Docker services and I was talking about the database services. So Docker is when you have Docker Compose specifically is when you have multiple services running on Docker. Number two, I was talking about Azure Cosmos DB is if you have Azure running your database services and managing everything, you can use Azure Cosmos DB, where number one, you can use either a SQL. I think Azure Cosmos DB is a NoSQL database, and we have SQL databases where you can be able to choose either between MySQL or Postgres SQL. Number two, somebody asked me about IoT Central, and I think I'll be able to connect you with a Microsoft developer who will be able to answer 100% of your queries. As of right now, I haven't been able to work on IoT Central on a production level, so I can't be able to answer you guys. So kindly allow me to skip that. So number two, remember we are working in reverse with this. We're just working on the services as we go to the subscriptions and the resources needed to be able to run this service. Number two, we have the app service. So if you have a Django, Node, Ruby, ni language gani ingine watu tumia, C++, C#, .NET, application that you
PHP.
would want to use, PHP. Yeah, if you are when you'll say, like if you would want to use PHP, Miss G, why you would want to use PHP, but ni sawa. But anyway, ni sawa tu. So tumia tu PHP, but anyway, ni sawa tu. So anyway, it's banter. So PHP is making people money. People hate on it a lot, but you can use it. Next.js is becoming PHP. So React is basically PHP. So yeah. So anyway, so you can deploy all your backend services, or if you would want to tie your front end and backend. So if you have worked on Django applications where you're able to deploy your front end and your backend, you can be able to use Azure App Services to deploy both your backend and your front end. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean if you would want to deploy an FTP or a backend service for your application. If you have used Node.js and you have tried to deploy on Heroku, if you have previously tried to deploy on Heroku, previously they used to allow people to deploy backend and front end for free, or backend, services for free. You can be able to see how you can be able to try and join, deploy your applications. You can be able to use Azure App Services for this, and it's pretty affordable. Probably uses a Linux B2 or a B1 machine that probably consumes $7 to $12 or $15 at most, or $20 per month, and you have $100 service subscription for your student ambassador. And if you're a Microsoft Learn student ambassador, you have $150 per month. So yeah, and then you have your virtual machine. So in order for you to run Azure App Service, you need to have a virtual machine that's running on the back end. And yeah, in order for you to have a virtual machine that's running, you need to have a subscription service. So for example, if Microsoft or your student ambassador, you're going to have a Visual Studio Enterprise subscription, and it's going to last for the period that you have subscribed for. So whether it's a month or whether it's, a year, based on how long you have described you have subscribed for, it's going to give you notifications on your notification panel, and it's going to tell you, hey, you have consumed this much, and yeah. So yeah, that's all I have to share today. Unfortunately, sina swali. Louis ameuliza si ni wale wasee, yenyewe ni ukweli. Yeah, Greg amesema ndovu ni kuu, hiyo ni ukweli. So yeah, if you guys have any questions, unfortunately my PC, I'm an amateur, I cannot see how to share my window screen. I wanted to share how you can create continuous integration and deployment to your applications, to be able to deploy serverless functions or to be able to deploy backend services from Node.js to your applications. I will be sharing Learn Microsoft documentation on the, and you can be able to see how you can be able to your clients.
Hi, Cyrus, you're breaking. Can't get you clearly. Hi, Cyrus, are you still there? Okay, so Cyrus is still around. If you have any questions for him, drop them in the chat. You can also reach out to him later on if you still have issues. I believe he's in the participants group, so you can look for him
Can you
there in
guys hear me?
GitHub. Oh yes, now I can hear you.
Okay, it looks like my Wi-Fi dropped. I was saying, because I was unable to share my screen, kindly give me probably a few minutes. I'll be able to share links where you can be able to see practically how people have been able to deploy. You can be able to see how people are able to deploy various applications. I'm so sorry, I've been unable to deploy. I think I'm still an amateur because I've been able to share my screen on Teams every day. I learn something new about Teams, and today is I cannot share my screen. So I'm able to present, but I'm unable to share my screen. So kindly give me a few minutes. or a few hours, probably latest tomorrow morning, I'll be able to share links to Microsoft Learn, where you can be able to see how people have deployed various applications and people have been able to train various models on Machine Learning Studio and have been able to integrate various Azure enterprises, for example, Microsoft Entra, and have been able to integrate the applications to be able to create secure applications. So yeah, unless there's any question, I'm happy to end the presentation.
I'll ask a question. Maybe you could repeat or clarify the difference between the Azure Web App Service and the Azure Static Web App Service, and how someone can choose like which one to use at this or that particular time. And then maybe also you could clarify the difference between a static web app and a dynamic web app.
Okay, so that's an awesome question. So often people would differentiate or would discriminate, using different services based on, various services. So you would have a dynamic application that's static. So what does that mean? So you have a dynamic app. Can you hear me?
Sorry to cut you. Yeah, there seems to be interference with your audio.
Can you guys hear me right now?
Yeah, but it's like really noisy. I don't know how to describe it.
Is it like shaky?
It's like, you remember those old TVs when you tune into a channel and it's rising?
Old TVs. Okay. Hey. Wow.
Yeah.
What about now? Hey.
Still the same. It was
It's
like
still
when you
old TVs.
like you know how else to describe it. Someone says in the chat your voice is noisy.
I can see Louis saying, yeah, my voice is noisy. Okay, let me do this. Kindly guys, give me a few minutes. I'll write up a description in the chat and I'll write up a description in the WhatsApp group. I'll distinguish the difference between Azure Static Apps, Azure Dynamic Apps, how you would use Azure App Service, Azure Static Apps, and what the differences are and why you would need to use both services. Is that okay? Hack4Computer, yeah, thank you. Yeah, Mnishangie, I want you guys to hack and create a new solution, yeah. Yeah, thank you, Wesley, yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry guys, but bana ni network imesumbua na naomba mnipe nafasi nitaandika description. Kindly write the messages in this chat because I'll have access to this chat even after you guys leave the meeting. So my first description is describing the difference between Azure Static Apps and Azure Dynamic Apps. I hope everything else is clear. I'm so sorry. My network hii masaa kila mtu kwa Wi-Fi, so yeah.
All right, Cyrus. Thank you very much for the informative session. I believe we've all learned a lot today. With regards to Azure, we learned about, the different services in Azure, the resource groups, subscriptions, how you can deploy solutions using Azure. So as he said, sadly, we weren't able to see the hands-on demo because he's having issues sharing the screen. However, he'll share the resources, and if you have any questions, continue dropping them in the chat. He'll have access to the chat even after the meeting is over, so he'll answer your questions even in the WhatsApp group, as Louis is suggesting. So if you have any more questions, be sure to drop them. I think I'll give you an allowance of 7 minutes to just drop your questions. Otherwise, the meeting is over. Thank you very much for joining. I still can't wait to see what you guys have come up with. Yeah.
I'm so sorry, guys. I really wanted to show you guys how you can create continuous integration and deployment. Feel free to reach out on WhatsApp. I think probably it's because there's a new update of Teams. I've just updated my PC, so there's a bug. I'll just roll back to the previous updates, and then I'll be able to show individually or create a recording and share a YouTube video so that you can be able to see how you can be able to create continuous integration and deployment after you deployed your code to GitHub. So I know you guys can still not hear me clearly, but I'll be able to share all these things probably clearly or in a much better tone later in the day. Thank you, guys.
All right. Thank you, Cyrus, and everyone else for joining. Again, if you have questions, drop them in the chat. Other than that, the meeting is dismissed.